A relationship is strengthened by trust, communication, patience, compromise, intimacy, finance, and respect. These are the building blocks of a long-lasting union. And once you sign on the dotted line, it becomes the business of marriage. To Death Do Us Part. Hosted by Serena Goodman and Jeff Strange.
Welcome to the Business of Marriage, and we're going live on Facebook. And so I'm Serena Goodman. And so for those of you who don't know about the Business of Marriage podcast, we created this, and the target is to help some folks, right? People who are contemplating marriage, those who are already married, or some who are trying to figure out if they should exit the marriage. So we are here to help you with that. As you can see, I am on the stage by myself today because my partner here, Jeff Strange, he is under the weather. And so, the party goes on even if the host ain't here. So having said that, let's get started. So let's unpack some stuff. So today we're going to talk about how to choose a mate, right? And that's a big topic. That's a really big topic. So I want to give you some history first. So let me give you some history. Back in about 1935, right? When President Roosevelt was in office, he came up with the Welfare Reform Act. And in the Welfare Reform Act, the biggest part of that component was to disassemble the black family. Now, even we go further back into slavery, right? The big part there was to break down the black family. Let's go all the way up into the 60s. So we get into the 60s, and now New York City had a rule. And so what was happening was that a lot of black folks was moving from the South and migrating to the North. So what they decided to do to make sure that they could stop certain folks from being able to benefit, if you will say, from the Welfare Reform Act is they came up with the no man in the house rules. You can look it up. I'm going to give you some history right now. So the no man in the house rule meant that the social workers had to make these unannounced visits to black homes and make sure that there were no sight of a man in that home. If they found any signs of a man in the household, if there was shoes in the household, if there was a suit in the household, if there was a shirt in the household, then that meant that the welfare checks was going to stop and they were going to be turned off of welfare. So that's where all of this stuff really started to happen. Now, the breakdown of the black family is not anything new to us, but this is time to make a change. So how do we make a change? When we know better, we do better. So we're gonna unpack some stuff today of what you should look for when you're looking for a mate. First of all, you got to know what the deal breakers are. You got to understand what's the things that you cannot and will not tolerate, and that's important. The other thing is that you got to figure out what you're doing. So what's your goal? So if you met someone, is it that you just want to date them? Is it that you want to look into it and see if you can be married at some point? You have to know what it is, because if not, what are you doing it for? And all you have to do is label it. So if it's not for that, if it's just that you needed companionship and you wanted to get with someone and you just wanted to keep your bed warm for a night, couple of nights a week, call it what it is. But understand that once you've made the determination that this person may be a person that could qualify as a mate for you, someone that it could move into marriage at some point, there's some things you should do. The first thing that you need to do is to take a real good look at that person. And I'm not talking about looking at them from the outside, because understand something. I don't care what people tell you. We live in a virtual society. So it's so virtually oriented that people will judge you by how you look. That first connection was not a verbal connection. The first connection is going to be a physical connection, right? Because no one said anything to each other. So that whole chemistry thing that we talk about, that little extra something that's going on, that's something that comes from your sight. It went to your brain, and your brain said, I like that, right? You didn't get past anything else yet. So it's all visual. What I'm going to tell you to do is you're going to have to go past the visual, because sometimes what's really, really good for you may not come in the package that you might have wanted it to come in. But some of those great attributes that when we go through some of them, that person may have it, even if they may not have the looks that you would have ordinarily wanted. So let's look at this for a second. So you met someone, you like the way he looks, he's appealing to you, that's fantastic. Let's go beneath the surface. Now there's some questions you should ask. Why date? The importance of dating is for you to gather data. That's what dating comes from. You gather the data. How do you gather the data? By asking those really, really important questions. So what important questions should you ask, right? What's some of the questions you should ask? So one of the questions that you might want to ask is, you might want to ask them if they have any kids. That would be good. It would be good to know if the person has some kids or not. Or you would want to know, do they want kids? Or you would want to know, can they have kids? See, these are the questions that you need to ask. A lot of times people don't ask these questions. You get involved, you invest yourself, your heart, your money, because there's going to be some money spent here. So someone's paying for dinners and all these different activities that you're going to do. And someone's paying to get their hair done and their new outfit and all that other good stuff. So everybody's got an investment on whatever level it is, right? So once you figure out on this whole investment part, and you ask those questions, so you want to know, right? Because if you're a person who wants to have children, then why would you go further with someone who says, I don't want any kids? That means that you're unequally yoked. A lot of times people think that being unequally yoked means that it's about money. It's not necessarily about money. Being unequally yoked means that you could also be unequally yoked in values, in your morals, in your goals. What you want for yourself is different from what they want for themselves. If they're a procrastinator, if you are a go-getter, you may not be a match for each other. And sometimes that's real. You can meet people and you could like them a whole bunch, but you're not a match for each other. And sometimes it takes a lot of courage to say, hey, you know what? I'm feeling you. I like you, but I don't think this is going anywhere. And if it's not going anywhere and you want it to go somewhere, if your goal is that you want to have a mate, invest in that, have a committed relationship, and then ultimately a marriage and a successful marriage, then there's some things that you got to take a look at. All right, so we said, do you have any kids? That's important. Why would I say something like that? When you're first starting out, when you're in your 20s, very different. It looks very different in your 20s than it looks in your 30s, than it looks in your 40s, than it looks in your 50s and your 60s. Every decade, your thought process is going to change. So in your 20s, you meet someone and you're building together. His finances, her finances may not be such a big deal because you're growing together. You may not have any children at that particular point. So you're starting off and you're having children together. That looks very different. When you start to get in your 30s and your 40s, people have had some relationships already. And generally what will happen is that they'll have some children. How do you feel about a blended family? How do you feel about coming into a household and maybe she told her son, you're the man of the house. What does that look like now when another man comes into the house? That changes things. That changes the dynamics of things. So that's a conversation that really, really has to take place in advance, right? Before you start going any further, right? Even when you start to meet her children, his or her children, because you have single dads. So you meet their children and you want to know what are the ages of your children. If someone has a 3-year-old or 4-year-old, looks very different than getting in a relationship with someone who has a 19-year-old or a 16-year-old. There's one period where kids could be real funky. And when they real funky like that, no matter what you do to try to please them, sometimes it doesn't happen. It depends on how people raise their kids. You can't tell other people's kids what to do. So those are conversations that you're going to have. And it looks very different in every age group. So that's another thing. You want to observe and see whether or not the person is respectful, right? You might want to say to them, like, what kind of relationship do you have with your son or your daughter's father or mother, right? You want to know. If they say something to you really, really nasty about that particular person, I would probably think that at some point they may say something nasty about you. So that's something that you want to think about, because that's important. How they relate, even if the relationship failed, how do you co parent? How are you respectful enough to co parent? Are you mature enough to realize that the children come first, and that how you see things and how that person see things is not the most important part of the equation? The biggest part of the equation is that the children are well rounded and well adjusted and well loved, and that they have both parents. I got some really interesting statistics that I came across. I thought it was really interesting. It says 74.3% of kids that are 18 and younger. So in white households, they have both parents. But 38.7% of kids that are 18 and younger are in African American parents, where they have two parents in the household. That's a drastic difference. A lot of times in this conversation, you're going to hear me talk a lot about black families. Black families is my specialty. I'm a black woman. I know about black families. I know about black men. I know about black women. I know about black babies. So a lot of my conversation is about that. The other part of the reason is because the needs of the black man and the black women are very different than those of my Caucasian sisters and brothers. It's very different. The struggle is very different. How we relate to each other is very different. How we blend our families together is very different. When you get in your 40s and 50s, the chances of you coming across someone who don't already have children with maybe one or two other people is very unlikely. And what does that look like? How do you get all of that together? All right, so now that you know, you want to ask about children, so that's a factor. You want to see if the person is respectful. Watch how they behave under pressure. How do they handle a situation when it doesn't go their way? Yeah, that's an important component. So when you're looking for a mate, you want to see how do they handle pressure. How do they handle their finances? Yeah, are they a person that says, well, you know what, I'll pay that later, or I want that expensive bag, so I don't care. I'm only going to pay half my rent this month because I really want to spend the other half on it, on doing something for my car or whatever it is. That's something that you have to look at, is how they handle their finances. That's another important part. When you choose a mate, a man, well, and a woman, I would say you want to know if they could cook. Cooking is not important. I think cooking is very important. Why? Because as women, we are, and we should be, and we were geared to be responsible for the nourishment of our families, to make sure that our men eat well and to make sure that our children eat well. And if nothing that we got out of the pandemic, when all the restaurants was closed, that if you didn't know how to cook, then shame on you. Because if you don't know how to take care of yourself and take care of the needs of your family, then that means you was going to place yourself in an unfortunate situation. So if you get with somebody because she's fine or he's fine, but he can't cook, she can't cook, because at some point, if you're going to coexist, right, you're going to want to divide up some of the responsibilities in the household. So do you want to do all the cooking, or would you like him to be able to help out, maybe cook 2 days a week, something of that nature? But it's important, men, that you should look and find out if the woman can cook. And if she's healthy, if she can cook healthy foods. I mean, it's fine to eat certain things, but you know, when you know better, you do better. So we know that we in our communities have the highest level of diabetes, hypertension, heart disease. So you want somebody who's going to at least be mindful of, yeah, maybe there's some times they're going to cook you some of that down south, you know, comfort food. But for the most part, they're going to try to feed their family something that's good and something that's healthy. So that's something else that you want to take a good look at, is if they can cook. Not if they can order food. I don't care if they're cute and they can order food. At some point, guess what? Everything's going to fade. Cuteness ain't going to be the same cute forever. And the way the bodies look, after a while, gravity takes its toll and stuff start hanging and sagging. And it's just, listen, that's just the world, the way of the world, and that's life. It's going to happen. That's the reality of it. Whether you like it or not, how she looks today or how he looks today is not how he's going to look 20 years from now if you plan on hanging around for that long. So you want to know if they could cook. The other thing is when you go to their house, you want to know if they could clean. That's another factor. Can they clean? The fact that they could come outside of the house and are on point with their outfits is fine, and their shoes is matching, and they got this power handbag. What good does that matter if you go into their house and you can't even find a place to sit down? Or you sit down and you got rolled up panties in the sofa. Or if you go into the kitchen and you get a glass of water and the glass is so greasy it's sliding out your hand. I don't really care how fine a person is if they keep a dirty, filthy house. Or if they have children and they don't take care of them. Does he take care of his kids? Does he take on the responsibility of his children? Does she take good care of her kids? That's another question that you got to ask. You have to ask all of these questions. That's why you date. Take your time, breathe, and gather data. Because sometimes what happens is that, especially if it's great sex, that becomes the forefront. That becomes the deal breaker. But when that becomes a deal breaker and that sometimes starts to fade, then the question is, what else do you have with you? It's important that you have something else going with you. Now, I'm going to tell you that there are some rules that I want you to keep in mind. And if you get some pen and paper, make sure you write this down. When you look for a mate, I don't want you to over-compromise yourself. Now, see, if my partner was here today, we probably going back and forth with this one. But I don't want you to over-compromise. And what do I mean by over-compromise? If it's something that you definitely are uncomfortable with, it's something you don't want to do, do not say yes when you really mean no. And then get into a relationship, and then now that person is looking for you to do those things that you said yes to that you don't want to do. Because that's over-compromising yourself. That's why you date. Take the time to fill out what are your deal breakers. And if that's something you don't want to do, then say no, I don't want to do it. And if that means that you are unequally yoked, then so be it. Then you go your way and that person goes their way. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because sometimes you're going to kiss a whole bunch of frogs before you find a prince or king in that batch. And sometimes it happens. And that's real life stuff. It's not easy. This journey for finding a mate is not an easy one. So I don't want you to overcompromise yourself. And don't betray yourself. You say, okay, what does she mean by don't betray yourself? Like, be honest to yourself. If what's important to you is honesty and transparency, then make that your deal breaker. Don't go through the whole relationship making believe that it's not important to you, that you have honesty in the relationship. In reality, that's something that you really, really want. If it's what you want, you put it on your list of must-haves, and you do not betray yourself. The worst thing you can do is to betray your needs and give that over and relinquish that power to someone else. That's something that you don't want to do. Another rule you want: do not get in a relationship with someone who doesn't want to talk. If you find yourself spending the evening with somebody, y'all might be doing all kinds of activities. As long as you're doing activity, that's cool. But when you want to get into a conversation, right, a real deep, transparent conversation, and they keep dipping and diving every time you want to have that conversation, leave them alone. Why leave them alone? Because you're never, ever going to understand them. You're never going to understand them. You're never, ever going to connect with them. You're never, ever going to get down to their soul to understand what they want out of life. And that's very, very important. So if you come across someone who just doesn't want to talk, they don't, hey, we don't need to do that much talking. Let's just, have fun. Let's just enjoy each other. Then that means that if what you want is different from what they want, then you're unequally yoked and you're not a good match for each other. The other thing is, I want you to stop looking. I want you to stop in the morning going out with the goal, today I'm going to find a man. Today I'm going to bag me somebody. I don't want you to go out with that mindset. If what you really, really want is a mate, a committed relationship, and a healthy marriage, then you're going to have to work on yourself. There's a lot of times you're going to hear me during the podcast, the whole history of this, you're going to hear me say stuff like, I come to the table a whole person. And the reason I say I come to the table a whole person is because if I come to the table as a broken vessel and I'm looking for someone else to complete me, to make me a whole person, that's borderline codependency. And if that other whole person should someday disappear, guess what happens? Then here I am, that broken woman again. So what you have to do, stop looking. First, work on yourself. Do that work on yourself. Clean your house. Get your mind in order. Get your finances in order. Work on yourself. And then be able to come to a relationship when it presents itself as a whole person. A lot of times people say, I can't find this, I can't find a mate, can't find this. Okay. Oh, the only people that come to me are thug-like people or people who, they don't have no job. Okay, listen. You draw to you what your energy is drawing. And that's what's very important, is that sometimes you have to put yourself in different circles. A lot of times people put themselves in the same circle with the same type of people that they don't want to draw. So excuse me, if you are putting yourself in the same circle time and time again, you won't get the same results. Isn't that the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting a different result. Well, if you're going to keep putting yourself in the same circles with the same type of people time and time again, then that's what you're going to get. It's going to keep coming back to you. You have to change that. The only person that can change the direction of how it's going to go is you. And if you're not willing to do the work that's going to require of yourself to get you in that healthy place to be a whole person, to come into a healthy relationship and be ready when he comes or she comes, it's just not going to happen. And I'm not a big Steve Harvey fan. I'm gonna keep it 100. I'm not a really big Steve Harvey fan, but Steve Harvey told this story one time, and he said this story that he was trying to get a car, and so he had this little jalopy in the driveway, right? And every single time he tried to get another car, for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. And so he had this car sitting in the driveway. It was on some cinder blocks, and it was all beat up or whatever. And he went to his grandma, and he was like, listen, I keep trying to get a car, but I can't get a car. And what she said to him was, as long as you got this jalopy sitting in the driveway on a cinder block, taking up space, you don't have room enough for the new car. Now, what am I saying with that? As long as you go through life holding on to baggage, as long as you go through life with some junky trunk and stuff sitting in your driveway, you don't have room enough for no new person to come in because you got too much baggage already. So you're going to have to unload some of that. See, that's some of that work I'm talking about. And people want it. People want success. They don't want the sacrifice. Successful relationships take sacrifice. It takes commitment. It takes compromise. But at first, it takes that you got to do the work in yourself. So eventually, he had that junk towed off the driveway. And eventually he got himself a new car. And we know Steve Harvey got some money now. So, but my point that I'm making, and I want everybody to understand this, is that it's doable. Healthy relationships are doable. And we could break this cycle. Even though during slavery times, the goal was to dismantle the black family. Welfare Reform Act, 1935. Dismantle the black family. The reincarnation of the Welfare Reform Act in the 60s. Dismantle the black family. We could change that. And how we change that is by having communication and we got to be on the same team. Black men have gone through a lot, and sometimes we do need to be more understanding. And it's not easy to be a black man in today's society. It's not easy to be a black woman in today's society. And that's how I see it. So I'm hoping that you got some pointers today on how to select a mate. And believe me, when I say select or choose, you are choosing. You have the right to choose. You have the right to choose what you want in your circle and what you do not. A long time ago, someone said that I come across like a person who's got a peephole in their life, and they look through the peephole and they figure out who's coming in and who's not. And guess what? They are absolutely correct. I choose my circle. I keep it as tight as I want it, and I keep it that way because not everyone deserves to be in your circle. You have to select that. Who do you want in your circle? Is it mutually beneficial for both of you? Those are the questions that you have to ask. And you can't be afraid to have those difficult conversations. If you can't have a conversation about finances, if you can't talk about your children or your exes, and you can't tell them what went wrong so that you know how to fix it, if you can't tell somebody your inner thoughts, you can't tell them what your morals are, what your values are, rather you want children, rather you don't want children. If you can't be truthful and honest with your mate, then what kind of relationship are you really, truly going to have? How successful do you think you're really going to be? So that's why we do the business of marriage, because there's a lot to this. It's not such a simple formula. It's not a simple formula, but you can win at it if you want. All right? So there we have. Now, I don't know if they have some questions for me, so I'm hoping that they have some questions, because I've been talking for a minute, y'all. So if you got some questions, come on with it. Do we have any questions, guys?
Well, we're doing something different tonight. Serena, you were spot on. Very good assessment on what you're talking about. The topic today, which is how you choose a mate. It's a couple of questions. We're not on our regular format tonight, but we'll be shaking out the kinks and be back spot on next week. But we have questions in the room.
All
The
right.
people that's in the room, we have a couple of questions. When you mentioned let's go back to the President Johnson's Welfare Reform Act.
Roosevelt.
No, was that the Welfare Reform Act in the 60s?
Oh, there's one in
I think
the
it's President
60s.
Johnson, Welfare
Okay,
Reform
60s,
Act,
okay.
right? Because you remember the movie Maud, right? Maud, what was that with Diane
That's
Carroll?
Claudine.
Claudine, right? What I call it, Maud?
You
Claudine.
said more.
Claudine.
It's okay.
Well, Claudine.
Yeah.
And
With James Earl Jones.
Yes. The thing is that since our ancestors came over here in bottom of slave ships, it was always to break down the men leadership in the black family, and they replaced it with the woman leadership in the black family. It's been going on for generations and generations and hundreds of years. I don't know where it started that it's a battle for a woman, an African American woman, to relinquish the power and let the male, the black male, take over the power. Now, there's a lot of obstacles in the way of that, because number one, we've been raised by single women so long that we really have to be retaught to take over that throne. Now, a lot of people were like, "Man, what the hell are you talking about?" In some cases, that families had father figures in the house, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So those cases, okay, but the large number of cases, as I even myself, growing up without a father figure in the house to teach me certain things. So I go into my relationships in that, not all the keys on providing,
Right. Yeah.
discipline, work ethic. You
Right,
know,
yeah.
This. So when we go into that, my question is that how do we get that? How do we come with some kind of common ground with the male coming together far as equal in a family setting?
Yeah. Okay.
Because we already know what they did. We don't know the history of it. But right now, how do we get back to being equal? And can you choose? Because you said choose a mate. By choosing a mate, like a woman choose a mate, should she look for that? Can I have an equal playing field with this mate that I'm choosing to bring in? Not me being, because it's like some of us, some women feels, it's a struggle to give up that leadership role. So I know some women wants it, some women, it's gonna be, if we take control in a percentage, it's gonna be, okay, I'm willing to give him a certain amount of control, and then I'm gonna get the most percentage of the control.
Okay.
It's in a common relationship family, a woman want a certain amount of control, and it's gonna be more than some male as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
The statistics. I'm talking about the odds.
Okay. So you said a couple of things. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna address a
Yeah.
couple of things. So the first thing I'm gonna say is, all right. So one of the things that's really happening right now is that women were forced to be in this precarious position, right? We weren't designed for that, to be the mother and the father in the household, but we were forced to be that. Now, this is what happens when you have women who are now having to be the father, right? They have to be the disciplinarian. They got to be the breadwinner. They got to keep all the plates spinning. Can't drop one of them. They got to do all of that, right? They got to keep the rent paid. Make sure the kids got a roof over their head. They're in school. They're doing all of this on their own. And then they meet a man. They have been doing that for so long. What tends to happen is the lines get very skewed. And so when a man comes in, they're not immediately ready to relinquish any power because they have too much to lose. So they're saying, let me watch for a little while. Let me see what this person is doing. The problem is that they need to make that decision before they bring that man into their household. That's what they don't do. And that's a lot of times why those relationships don't work, because they haven't established what those lines are. The average woman, if she's been holding everything down, she would welcome the help. If he was coming into that situation saying, I'm a helpmate, I'm here to go 50-50 with you, you've been carrying this load, and I want to alleviate some of this load. If he comes into it and he's adding to the load, now you're going to see her take control. She's going to take control because her ship must sail. She has no other option. She's got children on that boat. Now she got the man on that boat. She's carrying a lot. So that's the things that happen. A lot of the men are not prepared to come in and head a household. They never even learned how to do that. Most of them came from single mom households, with their mothers were probably very authoritative because they too was holding it all down. Maybe would have gotten a mate. Rather not, he came in and did 50-50, maybe or maybe not. So that's what he saw. So where did he look for it? Because if he was looking on television, he was looking for some black men that he could, identify with. Who did he see? Because what do we see that's really, really positive black men? You may see a few of them now, but if you go back, you saw what, Bill Cosby? And then look what they did to him. Whether he was guilty or not, that was what people looked at, like, right? A successful black man, a successful black family was a Huxtables. And look what they did to him. Rather he was guilty or not. That's not for me. I wasn't the jury. But my point is that they didn't have a lot of those positive black male figures. So who do they turn to? They turn to the guys that they see on the corner, right? They pass them every day. While they drinking their beer on the corner, they see some of them. If they get lucky, they get into maybe some community centers and they meet some black brothers there that might take a liking to them and start pouring into them in the community center. Or they may see a black teacher. But the amount of black men, male teachers, are completely disparate to the amount of women teachers. Mostly, they're women teachers. Not so many black men. So then where will they find that at? So now they get into a relationship themselves and they're trying to just figure it out. And as they figure it out and go from woman to woman and probably drop seeds here and there and there and there as they go along, they don't know how to be good fathers. Where would they learn that? Unless they seek it. That's the only way for them to learn it. And many times when a man does find that, when do they find that? In their 30s. Women, we mature a lot faster. So we're already in that mindset in the 20s of family mindset. They could adjust to that. But it would take, for men, it'll take in their 30s, some in their 40s, and the sad ones in their 50s.
Another question is, okay, we touched on the male figure in a family setting. Now, it could be his kids or it could be other kids. We touched on that base. So let's go back in the beginning when you got two male, female, and male just starting out.
Okay.
Just starting out. They don't have nothing. They building together. How do each of them coincide as far as building? What do they look for each other, male and female? What do they look into in the beginning?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, the first things that they should look at is if they're on the same page, if they have the same values. Because when you're young, sometimes you have different values, you see things differently. You think that when you get paid, the best thing is to buy a Gucci belt. Spend the whole paycheck on a Gucci belt, right? You have to make sure you're on the same page, because if you're going to start to grow together, then you start to have some similar mindsets. If it's about growth and development, maybe you want to talk about children. Maybe you want to forego having children right away because maybe you want to enjoy life. You want to enjoy each other. You want to travel. You want to see things together. Those are conversations that they should have when they're young. I mean, when they're young, it's like the world is their oyster. Like, come on. This is an opportunity for you to grow together, to start a business together, or start your careers together, right? And be a source of encouragement. That's probably one of the most exciting times, I would say, especially if you don't have a lot of baggage coming into it.
You think young women can choose a potential mate they can grow with? You think they have the potential of doing it, young women?
The young women of today? Yeah, I believe so. The young women of today are powerful and they're smart. And they know the importance of education. They know the importance of getting it together. And if they want family or if they just want to be single, they pretty much know in their mind what they want. I would say that the young women today are pretty much on point, the majority of them. You still have some that are fallen. And the reason why I'm going to say that is because that could be something generational, right? Like, just like sometimes you have people who are generational on welfare. It's caught in a system that they couldn't find their way out of. Or because, grandma was in this system, right? And then mom was in the system. And now the daughter's in the system. And then the granddaughter's in the system. Sometimes that happens. But that was that's an entire another episode, because that was designed that way for us to have an oppressive mindset and for us to be poor, stay poor, and be okay with being poor. So that's a whole nother mindset.
The reason why I brought it up, because in the business of marriage, you touched on it, that we must cover all scenarios. The young couple, You know, the young couple building to a union to come together to get married. The established couple, you know, in their middle, they're you know, they may have had a bad first go at it with someone, so they have children and things like that, and they want to get back on the bike, you know, them two. And then it's the older couples,
Right.
that's been, you know, and they're established, and they really need companionship more than anything, because they're already established financially, you know, spiritually and things like that. So just finding somebody compatible to be having companionship. But I'm staying on the bottom level, which is the young folks, because when you decide to choose a mate or choose choose to get together with a man or female, it's fun in the beginning, but I feel that it has to be some building blocks.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like, what do you want to do tomorrow?
Yeah.
Back in the day, a young man had to ask the father to even date his daughter. And the father asks him, "What are you doing? What do you do? How many goats you have? How many lands you have? What are you doing?" And if the young man couldn't say what he wanted to do, it didn't happen.
Yep.
It didn't happen. Now, we could bring that up today. You know, our young men, we have a lot of dreams and a lot of things we want to do, but if you don't see work, if you just hear talk and you don't see work, what do you do then? You know, what do you do then? Should the work be visual first, reality first, then the talk? Should you decide to say, okay, I want to get with him and then have kids and all these other things, and then it doesn't come to pass, you know, and then you started something. Now you're paying catch up, you know.
There's no such thing.
You know.
Ketchup is no such thing. Ketchup is something you put on your French fries.
Yeah.
Ketchup is no such thing. People think they're catching up in life. They never catch up.
And I don't want to make it a male thing. It is that it's really both of them.
Yeah.
That you believe, you want to believe, but it's no proof. And if we use the same aspect, that if you're going to ask Mr. Johnson, I want to date your daughter, Mr. Johnson said, what are you doing? Because I see you on the corner singing. What are you doing?
He's absolutely right.
And don't bring that dude around here, because he's doing nothing.
He's absolutely right.
And Mr. Johnson is right, as you know. But what happened with that? What happened with that? Mr. Johnson is not in the home of raising young women, right? So they make these choices, then all of a sudden they're in their mid-30s saying, what did I do? I have a few kids, I'm struggling, I'm this, and now you want to start all over.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things that happen. The first thing that happened is that someone must have told someone that when your kid gets 18, you have to stop parenting them. I don't know who told them that, because that's not true, because they still need parenting. See, so sometimes parents will give the message like, you grown now, because they don't want the responsibility of their young adult anymore. But see, young adults, their minds haven't even been completely, it hasn't even been formed enough. Their brain is not formed enough at some point to make those type of decisions that they are trying to make. Back in the day, you would come to the father, but now you don't have a father in the household. Most of them don't have a father in the household. So maybe they'll come to the mother, or maybe they just won't do it. They'll just do them. Right? Sometimes the mother's working 2 jobs, so they just going to do them. A lot of times that happens. When I got married, my father said to my husband, he said, listen, if you can't take care of her, send her back. Which meant that if you can't provide for her, if you can't make sure that she's okay and that everything is working well every day for her, send her back. If you can't afford her, send her right back. That's not the stuff that goes on right now. Well, I'm going to say to any young people, if they're thinking of that, the first thing that they need to do is to put together a plan. And that plan should be in writing. because you're not going to always see the action before you put the plan, right? So there's a plan of action. So first you put the plan together, and if you guys are having those conversations about coming together as one, and if you say you want to do education or you think it's a particular career that you want, you have to share that plan and put that plan in place. And that should be a 5-year plan at minimum. In 5 years, what is it that you expect to do in 5 years? Where will you be in 5 years? If you're going to enroll in college, what does that look like? Do you go first? Do I go second? How does that work? And then where do children fit in the equation? So they have to put a plan in place. That's the mature way of doing it. Now, the reality of it is sometimes it doesn't even happen like that. Sometimes they messed around, didn't use the birth control, got pregnant, now they got a baby. Now they're trying to figure out something with the baby in the equation. But that's not the ideal way if you really want to be successful at it. If you really want to be successful at it, I would say the best way would be to sit down, map out a plan together, something that works for both of you and that's beneficial to both of you for you to grow and to be better, to have more, to live the lifestyle that you want, and to break the cycle of poverty. Because that's what happens. When you start bringing children into the equation, children are expensive. So now you're going to need to go to the government for WIC. You're going to have to go and get some food stamps. You're going, right? So now you start talking about, now you're in this whole poverty bubble. And then if you get subsidized housing, now you can't make but a certain amount of money. So what do? They get you right in that cluster of poverty and they keep you there. The saddest thing for me is that when people live in the projects and they want to turn the apartment over to the next person like it's an inheritance. A welfare apartment in the projects is not an inheritance. What's an inheritance is when you own real estate and you pass that down to the next generation and next generation. When there's a deed, that's when it's an inheritance. But your apartment in NYCHA, that's not an inheritance. When we start to think like that, then that means that they win. They get us to have the mindset of poverty. And we got to break that cycle. And how we got to break that cycle is by building stronger Black families, Black relationships, and stronger Black communities.
So it starts from the beginning. It starts from the relationship in the beginning and what it turns into, when it starts turning into that you want to start being together more.
Yeah.
Start being exclusive to each other and loyal to each other. You have to have a plan.
You have to have a plan.
And two people have to have a plan, and the reality has to be in it. It's like we're not gonna do anything else until we both of us get to the start of what we want to do, regardless what you want to do. If you want to go to school, you want to go to college and get your education, you should stay single. You should stay single and or be in a relationship that you don't bring any
absolutely
people in it that you got to take care of.
Exactly.
It just should be you two building together to a point that, okay, financially we good. We got I say, like, not actually money in the bank. I'm saying we got money in the bank to spend to get kids now.
Exactly. And you'll know when you're ready. You will know when you're ready. That's the maturity.
And that will really stop the cycle. It's really stopped the cycle.
That will stop the cycle.
Young people really being serious about coming together.
Exactly.
Come together as a union.
Yeah.
And if you're not serious to come together as a union, okay, it's that you don't bring other things involved that you leave behind.
Absolutely.
You left that behind, and regardless, you're still a dad, you're still a mother, and that still affects.
Yeah, and one of the other big problems too is that in our public school system, they don't introduce financial literacy early enough. They need to introduce financial literacy earlier, so that if they do that, then young people will understand the importance of good credit, right? They'll of paying their bills. They will understand that. But they don't get that. When they get that, it's after they've already messed up their credit, got a couple of credit cards, didn't pay their bills, took out student loan, went to school one semester. Now they owe this money. Now it goes to default. What does that look like? Now they want to take your taxes. That's what they see. But they need to get that earlier. If they get financial literacy early, and if they get introduced to generational wealth and what that looks like, that's not just for white America.
You think that information should be applied in school or should be applied at home?
Well, I'm going to say it should be part of the curriculum in school and reinforced definitely in the home. Parents, I mean, look, if you got a single mom in a household, maybe she doesn't have it together herself financially a lot of times, because sometimes you're stealing from Peter to pay Paul just to make sure you keep everything together. If you can teach that at home, that's fantastic. For those who can't, I think it should also be taught in school just to be reinforced.
Because I believe it's like the future is the way. The young kids,
Yeah, it
is
is.
the way.
That's to change the
and
cycle.
and
It's
that's
the only
where
way to change it. Yeah.
they entice these young people with a whole bunch of stuff,
Yeah.
a whole bunch of credit cards, these iPhones, and all this spending and everything, and they make bad choices starting out in the beginning.
Yeah.
So if you make a bad financial choice, you're already behind it. You're already behind the eight ball already.
Exactly.
And then you try to build with this woman, and your credit is messed up because bought the car, did all this other stuff, and you can't afford it because you're building yourself. You're building yourself,
There you
and
go.
and if you don't got an idea or trying to figure it out, if you don't have an idea, and I want to put this out there and so everybody understand, we're not talking about the homes that has two parents in the home.
Right.
Different. It's just a low scenario.
Right,
Because
right.
people call me, it ain't like that with everybody. No, we have to talk
Right.
about the people that needs the help.
Yeah. Yeah.
This show wants to
Yeah.
help people that
Yeah.
needs the help. So we are going to talk about the higher graphics of the higher percentage of the people that needs the help.
Mm-hmm.
The people who don't need the help, they okay. They okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to make people find a way. And it starts from the beginning.
Right.
It starts from the beginning. I know there's a lot of obstacles, clubs, and drinking up, and
Yeah.
what they got the word of showing out or whatever they got these
Oh, I
days.
don't know.
And they have a lot. Young people have a lot
Yeah.
internet. They have a lot of access to memory of information, and it goes down to the same. I don't think morals change. Morals didn't change. I don't care if you got internet, you got Facebook. Morals is the same way. You have to have a plan on what you want to do when you see
They've
to you.
established that.
Yeah,
And
you
sometimes
have
that
to
comes from
establish
the
that.
home too, because
Yeah.
sometimes you have moms who
Yeah.
are competing with the daughters.
Yeah.
They in the club, drinking and
Yeah.
turning up with
Yeah.
the kids in the club. That's a very big issue.
Yeah.
Number one, I always make a rule. I don't party with my kids. We're not equal. I'm not your friend.
Yeah.
I'm
And
not your buddy. I'm not your chum.
And you shouldn't bring your personal situation around your kids neither.
No, you
because
shouldn't.
you're dealing with some man. If it's a personal situation that you're dealing, especially when you got daughters, you dealing with a man and you bring a man in your situation, and your daughters are seeing how the negativity of this person, or you dealing with them, or whatever y'all going on, y'all see the negativity of it, and it sometimes it perpetuates the same thing.
Yeah, but the flip side is that it doesn't always have to be negative.
Yeah.
There are times where you could bring a man into a situation, into a family unit, and it could be a positive experience. It could be a positive experience for the daughter to see how a man should treat a woman.
Yeah.
Not every man who comes into a situation and it's negative. Or that same man can show your son how to treat a woman by the way that he treats you. Now, women have to be more responsible for who they expose their children to.
Yeah.
Now, just because you feel like you want him to come over and Netflix and chill, that doesn't mean that that's what you should be doing at that time. If you have children at home, there's a limit to the things that you should do. Should your children run around and see you in bed with men who are not your husband? Absolutely not. They should not have all these uncle this and uncle that and uncle that who comes for a week, 2 weeks, and then he disappear. Absolutely not. Because what messages are you sending out to your children?
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to set an example for our children. Now, I'm not saying that we're perfect, because nobody's perfect. But one of the things that we have to do is we have to be mindful about what we do and how we conduct ourselves. If you call yourself the queen, you have to be the queen. You have to wake up the queen, and you get to go to bed as the queen. And that's just how it goes. There's no other way around it. Now, if you don't want to carry that, then you have to relinquish the crown. You don't get to wear the crown, and then you get to go out there and you try to beat your daughter on whose spandex could be tighter. It don't work like that. It doesn't.
But I know kids, it's like sponges.
Yeah.
And they see you go through, and maybe they don't understand the adult choices that you're making. They don't get it, but they end up perpetuating the same thing.
Yeah,
and
it's
making
the same
mistake.
They'll make the
and
same
that's
cycle.
male and female.
Yeah.
And they makes the same mistake.
It's learned
you have
behavior
made.
and exposure.
Yeah.
It's learned behavior and exposure. If you don't know better, you're going to continue to do the same thing. It looks normal to you. If you smoking weed and your mama smoking weed and your uncle come over and he's smoking weed, everybody high all day long, eating up everything out the cabinet, and that's a norm for you, and that's what your day look like, then that's what your day look like. If you see your mom get up and she gets dressed and she goes to work, and your dad goes to work, what do you think is going to happen? Eventually, you're going to go to work.
Yeah.
You surround yourself with 9 broke people, eventually you're going to be number 10. That's just the way it is. Now, can you break yourself out of that cycle when you see it? Yes, there are people who break themselves out of that cycle, but the percentage is low because they're not too sure how to navigate it. That's why you need a podcast like The Business of Marriage, because we're here for everyone to be able to help you navigate through this thing we call life. So, next Sunday, 7 p.m., now I want to make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you know when we're on live, so you can ask some questions, and I'm sure we're going to have some answers. So until next time, on Sunday at 7 p.m., peace, y'all.
A relationship is strengthened by trust, communication, patience, compromise, intimacy, finance, and respect. These are the building blocks of a long-lasting union. And once you sign on the dotted line, it becomes the business of marriage. To Death Do Us Part. Hosted by Serena Goodman and Jeff Strange.